The deaths of two African-American men and the outrage created by two grand juries finding white police officers innocent of any wrongdoing has renewed conversations about civil rights across the country. From placing body cameras on police officers to improving public policy, we discuss race relations on West Michigan. And thank you for joining us on West Michigan Week. On the panel, Matt Vandebunte, Grand Rapids Press and Live Media Group. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too, Patrick.
Jennifer Moss, WGVU Morning Edition host. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure
Welcome
to be here.
to the team.
Hey, good to be here.
And we have Chief David Rahinsky, Grand Rapids Police, and Daryl Ross from Link. Good to see you.
Thanks for inviting me back.
Well, it's been an interesting few months in this country, and I think it all comes down to perspective and where you are. You're in law enforcement. We've had two grand jury rulings, and there's been a lot of outcry that's taken place here. So from where the two of you sit, how do you analyze this? How do you break it down?
Go ahead, Daryl.
For us, it's just looking at the national events and seeing locally what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen in our great city of Grand Rapids. But not only that, really acknowledging that there are issues going on in the criminal justice system. Moreover, there's a genuine mistrust going on between communities, predominantly minority communities and police. So what are those things that we can do to increase the trust and increase conversation? So the body camera was one way to introduce transparency, but I think everybody acknowledges it's just one step of many steps that need to be taken. And ultimately, we just have to figure out how to have some impactful conversations and kind of change this trajectory the country's going on, and make sure that it doesn't, Grand Rapids doesn't become a microcosm of that.
Grand jury rulings and how you look at them from law enforcement's perspective.
Well, I would echo Daryl's thoughts. Daryl's a partner, Link's a partner. What we want to do in Grand Rapids is be a best practices city. What I want is for other police departments and other communities to come and study the Grand Rapids model, to see what we've done to make ourselves special. And the fact that we're able to have this dialogue, the fact that we're taking input from Urban League, NAACP, other community groups. We've had 2 public hearings. We had a meeting that was chaired by the NAACP. We want to be as transparent as possible, and we recognize who we work for. We're here to serve the community. The community's priorities drive our priorities. So it's a good opportunity to look at our value system and a good opportunity to improve.
You had mentioned a model, and yet we're seeing some numbers. USA Today came out with some numbers about the Grand Rapids Police Department, a 2011-2012 arrest rate per 1,000 residents, showing the black rate is 206.2, non-black arrest 35.6%. And when you look at the census data, in a city of over 192,000, we'll call it 65% are white residents, while roughly 21% are black residents. There's a great disparity here, and I know the ACLU has brought that to your attention as well.
They brought it to the attention of the public on Tuesday at the public hearing, and USA Today is where the ACLU pulled their numbers from. We're not actually quite sure what data source they used. We're doing our own examination, looking at Michigan numbers. Micers is a more accurate portrayal of our actual arrest numbers. We think that USA Today may have generated that from FBI, UCR crime reports, which are somewhat generic because they speak on a national level, and not everything that occurs in Michigan is classified the same nationally. So having said that, the numbers are concerning. We want to see if those are self-generated numbers, if those are repeat offenders, if those count each offense as a separate arrest. So we're starting to take a hard look at them.
What does your data indicate? Not quite that extreme?
No. We pulled preliminary Micers numbers, and there's a disparity that doesn't closely mirror the breakdown of the population. As you said, Grand Rapids is about 65% Anglo, 20% African American, about 15% Hispanic. Our arrest numbers do not that closely mirror those census breakdown numbers.
Can I ask, we talk about different layers and different things that we're trying to do. Body cameras is one thing that came up. But when you look at the makeup of the community, would it then behoove us to look at perhaps examining having the police department be more indicative of what our community is, and maybe the numbers escalate a little bit? I don't know what the minority scale is in the police department, but maybe we can talk about that as to how the numbers of officers of non-Caucasian descent, how that rates and relates to the community at large.
It's definitely a priority of ours, and Link has been involved in meetings where we've discussed, along with the Urban League and NAACP, what we want to do to recruit for diversity. We're relatively diverse in terms of law enforcement, but we're still not as diverse as the community we serve. So we've placed a real emphasis on recruiting for diversity. We wanted to start with the Grand Rapids Public Schools, start forming relations at a young age. We've got a presence in the Boys and Girls Club, an opportunity to serve as mentors for either children who are at risk or children who may not see themselves as potentially drawn to a law enforcement career. We want to introduce that as a potential. We're starting our own Police Explorers program, which actually falls under the auspices of the Boys and Girl Scouts of America. What we want to do is grow our own. We want kids from Grand Rapids of diverse backgrounds, of diverse economic situations to be drawn into a career of public service. Ideally, we would love to have a police department that exactly mirrors the community we serve. We've got some work to do. Right now, law enforcement is not necessarily perceived as an attractive career to a lot of people in the minority community. We understand that. So we need to build relationships and win people over one at a time.
Change the perception. Daryl, you?
Yeah, and that's another thing of the Operation Body Cam. One of it is looking also at the hiring practices of the city of Grand Rapids. So I don't even want to single out the police department, but overall, are there things that we're doing in our own screening? Are there things we're looking at or policies that we can examine? For instance, we already know that very few minority candidates are coming in, and that's one of the issues we have with recruiting. We want to make sure that it's not some of our internal policies that are turning people away from Grand Rapids, and then they can go to Benton Harbor, Detroit, and still be on the police force. So I know there's conversations to that end going on, but that is one of the 4 or 5 things we're asking under Operation Body Cam, is a real in-depth overlook of the hiring practices of the police force, and I would say City of Grand Rapids also. Because in a lot of ways, this is a competitive market. We need to show why you should move to Grand Rapids. And then as a community, we need to start asking ourselves what's going on where people don't want to be police, and where we can't attract national people. There's a whole lot of veterans getting out. We have the National Guard. I mean, I think as a community, some of those tough conversations is what are we doing where diversity is not seen as something we champion, and minority candidates aren't flocking to town to take over these jobs.
Daryl, to what extent would a more representative police department alleviate some of the trust concerns that you referenced earlier?
Well, I think it's perspective, right? So if you, and the homegrown piece is good, so if you understand Grand Rapids and then you understand the culture that you're policing per se, that's just trusting. I mean, we do a lot of community engagement. One of the reasons we're very effective is we hire people from the neighborhood. So it expedites the trust factor. So there's nothing, it's already mistrust, and then there's that cultural barrier. So I think when you have more diversity, you get more wisdom, you get more insight, but you get best practices, because I can't pretend to know the best way to approach a Latino citizen, but I can have Latino friends and so forth and understand their culture and so forth. So I just think with demographics changing, predominantly towards Latino, with the lack of representation in African Americans on the force, I think, and once again, I would also caveat with, it's not a Grand Rapids Police Department per se issue, but it is a police department issue nationally, and I think we just got to get our arms around it, because cultural competency, and I would say that's a low bar, cultural understanding and champion different cultures, it's going to take for all of us to really have good organizations.
And if you start building those relationships early on, you have a better chance, perhaps? I mean, will that address some of the issues currently going on? Because it takes a while to build a relationship.
I think it's both and. I think, yes, we definitely can grow them, right? And it's kind of like the snake that swallows the rabbit. You got to wait for it to come through. But we definitely need to be aggressively recruiting and talking about what Grand Rapids is doing. To Rahinsky's point, we want to be on the forefront of these issues. We want to be a model city. In doing so, we'll attract talent, and not only police force talent, kind of like the Smart Zone downtown, and be creative, think out of the box. But we can't continue to do the same thing and hope for different results. If this is truly important to us, diversity and representation is truly something we want in our community, we have to have real deep dialogue and honest dialogue as to what that takes. And it's going to probably look and feel a little different than the things we're doing now.
And here's what I think is unique about the Grand Rapids Police Department, really the Grand Rapids community. We're not being defensive. We're not saying we're good, we're a perfect agency and that there's no room for improvement. We're very in tune to the criticism. We're taking the input very seriously. We're looking for ways to improve, and we're looking to partner. That's not the case everywhere in the country, and we recognize that. So the relationships that have been formed here, built on trust, are going to allow us to get that much further down the road.
Daryl, you brought up something at a city hearing the other night, and I'd like to hear both of your takes on this. But IAT testing, I believe, which, if I'm understanding correctly, it has to do with gauging racial preconceptions of an officer.
So everybody has biases, and I think for a long time we've talked about race and we've talked about racism as a personal thing. You know, it's how do I feel about you? What's going on now is we have good people in flawed systems, and the system is perpetuating racialized outcomes. So what IAT testing does, or implicit bias testing, is it acknowledges that a lot of your feelings about race come from a subconscious part of your mind. So while we all like to think we kind of control our mind and we're these conscious animals, there's thousands of bits of information our minds process every minute, of which it's single digits, which we consciously are aware of. Implicit bias tests you individually and lets you know you have a predisposition towards this race or towards this feeling, and it's actually a scientific way to look where you can start self-correcting. So it came out of Harvard. You can actually take the test. It's on IAT. Just Google IAT. But it's really fascinating from the standpoint to Rahinsky's point, it's not being in denial. We all have preconceived biases. How does it affect our behavior? Let's have that conversation. I think for all too long, especially when it comes to race, we went through this generation and this time of saying, you know, race doesn't matter, color doesn't matter, but it's like me telling you, don't think of a pink elephant. First thing you think of is a pink elephant. So race does matter, and we're seeing racialized outcomes because we've taken that approach. And IAT just says, you know what? When I see a barking dog, this is how my body internalizes it. So next time I see it, I can kind of work on that, and you can apply it towards race also.
And these are some of these discussions we've been having for months now, before the grand jury or the decision to indict or not indict was made in either Ferguson or Staten Island. We've got a police chiefs advisory team. Cleve Jackson from the NAACP had brought this to our attention in terms of some credentialing that our police department is going to pursue regarding some additional racial diversity and racial diversity training. So this is not all responsive to some of the things that have occurred, but some of it is just an ongoing effort to really be the best police department we can be.
Take a quick look at another poll that was out recently, the U.S. Race Relations. This is an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. December of this year, 40% of Americans feel that U.S. race relations are good. 57% say it's bad, and of that, 23% say race relations in this country are very bad. That's compared to July of 2013, when most Americans said 52% good. So we're seeing this shift. When you see these numbers and just that feeling that we're going through right now, it's really opened up this discussion at the same time. And you're saying this was going on well before the incidents that were taking place.
I can say, and as a relative newcomer here, this predates me by a long time in terms of our efforts to recruit for diversity. Darrell and Link have suggested an outside assessor come in and make sure that we're not policing in terms of bias-based policing. That study was done at our agency back in 1999. So it may be time to take a fresh look with a fresh set of eyes. But these are not new issues to us. But having said that, I think every so often it is good to reinvigorate that same debate and bring some fresh perspectives to it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, the discussion continues on race relations in just 1 minute. All right, I'm going to come back with the criticism. We're back with more West Michigan Week, and we're discussing how to improve race relations and community policing here in Grand Rapids. Chief Rahinsky is here. I haven't had a chance to be at a number of these commission meetings, But you said that there are criticisms. What are the glaring criticisms that you're hearing from the population, and what are some of the things that you plan to do to correct those?
Well, encouragingly to me, the criticisms that I've been hearing have been systemic. They've been historic. A lot of people have gotten up and actually prefaced their comments by saying, I don't see this here in Grand Rapids, or we have a good relationship with our community policing officer. And that's not to say we're perfect, but a lot of people have recognized that some of these issues are cultural, they're countrywide, they're not restricted to law enforcement. So I think the discussion starts with law enforcement in light of some things that have transpired recently, but I think this is a discussion that we as a country need to be having.
Do officers take the IAT test?
It was new to us. I was unfamiliar with it until Link brought it to our attention, so it's something that we're discussing now.
And then body cameras, that's been the overarching conversation in the last few weeks. You were in a bit of a tough spot. Early on, you said you resisted, not the best idea.
Actually,
then the mayor comes out and says, I'm for it. Puts you in a tough spot as well, and you have the union to deal with as well. So
it's not that I resisted. What I said was I shared my concerns. I think a lot of people, intuitively, body cameras and transparency seems to be a good idea. And what I shared was just a desire to slow down the process, to have a thorough vetting, and to make sure that we have policy in place and that we recognize some of the unintended consequences before we move towards this new technology. Some of my concerns were people call us all the time to share information on what's going on in their neighborhood. They call us at the low points in their life, when they're the victims of domestic abuse, when they're the victims of sex crimes. We come in contact with juveniles on a regular basis. So what I asked is for us to have that dialogue first. I want to know what the public's ideas are in terms of the proper protocols for using those cameras, because I certainly don't want to be the arbitrator of how they're going to be used. I think that dialogue needs to take place. Once we've answered those questions as a community, then I think the timing's right to move forward with the technology.
Chief, sorry.
We're both jumping in there.
When I talk to the police officers, they say, hey, if they want us to wear body cameras, fine, we'll wear them, but we're not sure it's worth the cost. In your expert police opinion, is it worth the expense to have these? Will it improve policing in Grand Rapids?
I think what they're referring to, and having had the same conversations, we have one of the most robust in-car video systems on the market. The city just spent the better part of $750,000 improving our in-car video system. Our in-car video and audio system will capture a conversation line of sight for nearly a mile from the car. So basically, the overwhelming majority of our contacts that occur in the public purview are being recorded, both video and audio. So what we're talking about is now the ability to take those cameras inside people's homes and to take them to other places where there is a certain expectation of privacy and what that'll look like. But I've heard the same thing from my officers that you have, which is overwhelmingly they recognize why the public is desirous of the technology, and they're very confident that at the end of the day, after sharing what it is we do on a daily basis, that the public will be reassured that they've got a very professional, very empathetic, well-trained police department.
But it could get to be quite expensive, could it not? I mean, because there are many other costs involved. There was a story this morning on NPR regarding the privacy issue, but also people, how much of that is public? Because there was a guy, I think it's in Seattle, he asked for all the dash cam videos. It was 1.6 million videos.
Yep.
And they've got to go get these videos out of storage. Then they've got to review them first before they can just give them to him, because in case those situations, the domestic or any of those things are on there, they can't just release them. And then he takes them and posts them on like Facebook. And he has that right to request them. And so then that onus is on the police department now. You have got another layer. Not saying that the cameras aren't needed. I'm just saying there are a lot of costs involved with that.
So if I can add, so I think that's one of the conversations we're having. So nobody's saying just roll them out 100%. It's a phased approach. We'll get to 100% within 6 months. As far as cost, and it's with thoughtful policy. So I think some of these arguments are red herrings, right? So nobody's saying come out and hold the data indefinitely. So right now, I think the proposal is you hold data for 2 months unless it's an ongoing investigation or it's some type of complaint, then maybe it's longer. So I think the devil is in the detail of the policy. However, the feedback we're getting, and most of the people who are against it, it's almost with the assumption that you just put a camera on and you go into the street without thinking these things through. We've thought through domestic violence, we've thought through juvenile. Of course you should not have it if the police is talking to somebody who is giving up information. And all of this is well spelled out in the proposed policy. And a lot of it is spelled out even in the policy that I think is in the House of Representatives on the state level. So these are things that work. We know they work. We know it reduces crime. We know it increases the civic responsibility of police officers. It's a win-win. The other thing I would say about the cost, the police union is saying, well, you know, we can hire police officers. Let's just be honest. The police union has never seen a cop they don't like. In Ferguson, in New York, it was backing the police officers. I think we have to acknowledge that not in Grand Rapids, but in other places, we have issues with police and the treatment, or the criminal justice system is putting them in a place to perpetuate that. And all we're saying is let transparency be the common denominator of it. Let's have true, good policy and transparency. But I don't think increasing the amount of police, and we cannot arrest our way out of this. Everybody acknowledges we cannot arrest our way out of this. So I would offer to the police union to kind of get a little more innovative than every time there's a cost issue to come out and talk about how many police we can hire for that number. As a community, we have to come up with other solutions than hiring cops and arresting people. And to put that in perspective, right now, if you're black in Grand Rapids, you're arrested at a 10% higher rate than in Ferguson. White people are arrested at a 50% lower rate. The chief, me and leader, you in the news, the commission, nobody wants to be a leader in this city. And the conditions that happen in Ferguson play out. So right now we have an opportunity to be innovative. We have an opportunity to have some deep conversations. So I hope these red herring type of allegations that they're throwing out don't stop the momentum. We have to make some real good progress.
Can I quick ask one more question about that? In the Grand Rapids Times, will video cameras really reduce police brutality? Because they're saying Eric Garner's situation was on videotape, and yet it didn't turn out the way many people in the community wanted it to with the grand jury. So are we saying it really will make a difference?
Oh, I think it makes quite a difference. So even in the Garner compared to Ferguson, there was no argument of fact. There wasn't a he said, she said. It questions the criminal justice. Rahinsky alone, me alone, nobody can do all of the changes it takes to really get to the issues within the overall criminal justice system, but we can have a better intake system, and we can do things on the police level and on the commission level and prosecution level to make these issues not occur. And one of it is to increase transparency. So for instance, in Ferguson, it was quite divided, and you've seen what happened. Everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, predominantly after Garner, everybody was upset, and it's because you have to believe your lying eyes, right? So the next day when you have Boner coming out in the Senate saying, yeah, we need to look at something, I think that right there speaks to how powerful transparency and images are over a he say, she say.
I would want to interject the discussion that we've been having in terms of adding additional personnel. What we're looking to do is put officers in the schools. We're looking to increase our footprint in the Boys and Girls Club. We're looking for additional community policing officers. We recognize our role. And Darrell makes a good point. Not all problems can be solved through enforcement. Some of these issues, the preponderance of these issues, need to be served by taking the relationships we have and continuing to build upon them. So when we're asking for more resources in this most recent budget cycle, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the opportunity to take officers out of cars and put them in contact with the people who we serve.
So Chief, if you've got $1 million or whatever the figure is, do you spend it on community policing officers or body cameras?
I recognize my role, and the officers recognize theirs. We serve the community. It's not for me to make an arbitrary decision that's going to affect 200,000 people. We've got an elected form of government. People have been very quick to weigh into their elected officials. I serve that body. So the public has been very clear about what direction they'd like us to explore, and that's the direction we're exploring.
Are you shopping for cameras right now?
We've started to price them out. And the technology is so new that from a low-end camera for a few $100s all the way to a high-end camera for a few thousand. The issue, as you pointed out, is the data storage and the cost of data storage. I'm familiar with the case in Washington State that you referenced. The individual made a blanket request for all video and was posting it on YouTube. The court ruled that he was within his legal boundaries to request all of that tape. There is a department in Washington State that after going to a camera system, they were unprepared for the level of requests that they had gotten. So in their inability to comply with FOIA requests, they had to freeze their program. So what we don't want to do is be in that position.
All right. We'll end it there. Matt Vandebunte, Grand Rapids Press, MLive Media Group, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you, Patrick.
Jennifer Moss, WGVU, Morning Edition, West Michigan. Chief David Rahinsky, Grand Rapids Chief of Police, and Daryl Ross from Link. Thank you.
Thank you.
And tune in to Morning Edition West Michigan with Jennifer Moss, weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. on 88.5 Grand Rapids and 95.3 Muskegon. We'll see you next week. Until then, have a great weekend.